Hi, I'm Michelle Boyd Waters, and I am a scholar of adolescent literacy, writing pedagogy, and student-centered learning. You may know me from rethinkela.com. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about my teaching experience and what I've been doing since I've actually left the classroom. And one of those things is working in a writing center. And I have stories that I've shared from my time in the classroom. A lot of that's on the rethinkela.com blog, but I don't have a lot of content centered around my educational or teaching experiences after I left the classroom. Sorry, I need something to fiddle with. Anyway, so I wanted to share a personal narrative that I wrote. It's still kind of a rough draft, but I wrote it during the Oklahoma Writing Project Advanced Institute. This is a piece that I worked on the entire week, and it's still a rough draft. It's based on a opportunity that I had to work with a writer in the writing center, but I've changed details to protect the identity of that person. But this really emphasizes or illustrates, I should say, my experience with helping somebody change possibly the trajectory of their life through helping them with their writing. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and get to it. It's called Making a Difference. And I have a copy of it that I printed out. So I'm just going to read it from here. And yes, I'm nervous. I always am whenever I turn the camera on, but it will be okay. It'll be okay. I will make this happen. When a lawyer asked Taylor Mawley what teachers do, the poet famously replied that teachers make a difference. I love his irreverent poem, and I can see the difference that teachers have made in my life. But as a teacher, I struggle to see how I'm making a difference in students' lives, especially since I only have them in my classroom for a limited amount of time. Yet every August during our professional days, my principals would remind my colleagues and me that teachers are the number one in-class variable that impacts student learning. Then, when I go to Mardell or the dollar store on Teacher Appreciation Day, the shelves of knickknacks remind me that teachers plant the seeds of knowledge that will grow forever. Yet I sometimes feel that I have to wait years to see the fruits of my labor, even when I have students in my classes for 3 years. Even so, just like so many of my colleagues, I would show up at school every day, meet students where they were, provide them with the support and information and learning context they needed to grow, or they needed to learn and grow as writers, scientists, mechanics, historians, doctors, lawyers, and yes, future educators. We often do this with few resources, too many students, and barely enough time to catch our breath through the day, much less stop to notice the difference that we're making. Sorry, I didn't have to get a drink of coffee. The first thing I noticed when I stepped out of the classroom to start my PhD program was that I was able to breathe again. My anxiety tapered down from a 10 to a 4. Anyone who says that earning their PhD was the hardest thing they've done has never taught 6 hours of seventh graders the year they returned to school after the pandemic. I could take a deep breath, relax, sit, and think about the pedagogies I was using in the classroom. And then my professors introduced me to the theorists whose work supports the pedagogies that truly do help students learn. Theories that helped me articulate what I already knew, that writing is a complex system of thinking processes that results in multiple drafts of text using an iterative series of actions to achieve a final draft, or that students learn best from others who are more knowledgeable, or that students interpret their abilities based on their previous performances, the level of performance they've seen from others, feedback from their peers and teachers, and their current emotional state. Even knowing all of that, how could I ever catch my breath long enough to put these theorists into practice, or these theories into practice? And could these theories answer my questions about how I could truly make a difference in students' lives? I discovered one answer to these questions at the Writing Center. In my first week as a consultant in August 2022, I wrote the following in response to one of our orientation writing prompts. Turn the page. During my journey as an English teacher, I discovered that I do not like being the sage on the stage. It makes more sense to me to sit down with a writer or group of writers and help guide them to convey the message they want for the purpose that they want to a specific audience. So far, I'm seeing that the Writing Center is set up to enable consultants to intentionally nurture writers in their authorial journeys, and I want to learn how to be better at doing this. I'm wanting to learn more effective strategies for working with writers. I'm looking forward to seeing writers grow, even if I only see them once for 30 minutes. I'm looking forward to getting to know the other consultants and being part of a community of writers who strive to support each other, understanding that we are all writers and communicators. Since then, I've had the opportunity to consult with more than 600 writers, including everyone from local high school students writing scholarship essays to engineering students in their PhD programs writing dissertations or journal articles. Honestly, I still have no idea what they were writing about, but they had sentences and they made sense. The one story that stands out for me is that of Gustavo, a gentleman who had retired from the mining industry and was now employed in one of the facilities support services at the university. I sat down with him in the Writing Center 4 times during that summer session of 2024. He had scheduled an appointment with the Writing Center because he had a goal, and the only thing standing in his way was his personal statement. He wanted to start a PhD program so that he could develop programs that would help prevent workplace injuries. He'd already applied once and been rejected, so he's asking for help to try again. Sorry, I used the word programs like twice in one sentence, and that bothers me. I'll have to edit that. All right. The first thing I noticed about Gustavo is that he was a quiet, unassuming man who'd clearly been around long enough to see a few things. We sat down at one of the round tables in the Writing Center, and in measured words, he took time to find the right turn of phrase. He told me his goal and showed me his personal statement. I looked at his first paragraph, and right away I noticed what was holding him back. He had written, "My aspiration for a PhD in organizational leadership has broadened my perspective, guiding me towards something impactful and personally resonant. My drive to engage with the broader community has always been strong. I have resolved to advance my work as a vocational skills instructor. I believe this degree can equip me to achieve my objective of influencing communities and entities that appear to be navigating constant transitions." The language or the problem, as I saw it, was that his words were abstract, generic, and used a lot of vague language and aspirations, but said absolutely nothing about him. So I asked him to share his story with me. As he was telling me about his life, I wrote down some of the details and shared them with him in my session notes. Below were some of the comments you made that stood out to me as being important to include in your statement. I retired from the mining industry. I was seeing a lot of accidents that led me to get certified in health and safety. I am a health and safety trainer. I have done numerous training in organizations where I see there's a great need for leadership and employee safety. I want to take my career beyond where I'm at to help organizations with their leadership and employees. The number one problem I see is that there is no communication between employees and leadership. Collaboration means a lot. There is a great need. I want to be able to reach out to them. His personal statement looked nothing like this, and the missing piece was his story. So I told him that he needed to include the details he had shared in our conversations. The next time he returned, I saw that he still needed to work on telling his story. So we talked, and I shared my advice in session notes. Notes for changes to be made in document. See paper copy. Add this phrase you said, create custom retraining plans based on feedback from leaders and employees. Make sure you include your life perspective and how that impacts your ability to implement the research methods you'll learn about. Remember that you have a wealth of experience that you can rely on as you're designing research studies and determining what information you need to solve the problem and gaps in knowledge you've discovered. What gaps in knowledge or what problems have you already discovered? I suggest writing about your creativity and how you would use that to solve problems in your field. I recommend being more specific. What problems did you see? What solutions did you recommend? Here's an overall structure I suggest that you use. Where have you been? What are you trying to accomplish? And how can you and this program work together to do that? So we worked together on his personal statement every week for a month. He would make revisions, bring his draft in, and I would remind him to be specific. I'd point out that I would point out the places where he needed to add his story. And then the summer ended and I never saw him again. Until I showed up for my first shift in the writing center in January, and our administrative assistant said that Gustavo had stopped by looking for me the first day we'd opened. Naturally, my first thought was that I was in trouble, but I quickly reminded myself to step back from that mental ledge and ask questions. The admin assistant had no idea what he wanted, but noted that he said he'd stop by again. Sure enough, he dropped in a couple of weeks later and handed me a purple envelope with a card in it. I pulled out the card, and on the right side it said, "You've made such a difference. So grateful for your support and encouragement." In his cursive handwriting, Gustavo had written, "Thanks for everything and believing in me, Gustavo." On the left side of the card, he'd written, "My acceptance date, December 2024. Then he put the name of the program that he entered and said that he'll be starting in the spring. If my work as an educator could have this much of an impact on somebody who already retired from one career, attained a master's level degree in one field of study, and is seeking a PhD, how much more of a difference can I make in the life of someone who's just starting out if I'm given the time, space, and resources?"